What do you mean? What's going on? Something was wrong. He could feel it. But was it already too late? The royal servant led the prince to his father. Inside the dimly lit chamber, the king sat motionless, his wrists bound by an unseen force. His once mighty presence was reduced to nothing. "Father, I'm here! Tell me what's going on. What happened here?" The king's eyes flickered up, locking onto the prince. His breath hitched. He stared, unblinking. "I must be losing my mind," he muttered, his voice hollow. "I'm seeing things. This is a cruel punishment. Seeing my dead son? No, it's me. I'm back. I've been through a cruel journey, but none of that matters. It's not about me right now." The prince's voice was firm. "Please tell me what's going on." The king exhaled sharply, his fingers curling against the chains. "I was grieving all this time, losing my one and only son," he admitted, his voice strained. "But Cinderella, she was grieving just as much, maybe worse." His breath shuddered. "And instead of protecting her, instead of comforting her, I made a mistake." His eyes darkened. "I cast her out. I was cruel to her. Forgive me, son. I turned my anger toward her, and I shouldn't have." His voice cracked. "And now she has become what I feared most." The prince's fist curled, his jaw clenched. His voice was steady. "Where is she?" The king hesitated. His gaze was heavy, unreadable. "They say she rules beyond the dark forest." His voice dropped lower. "But she does not want to be found." The prince's expression hardened. Without another word, he left. The prince rode through the streets, but instead of answers, he was met with silence and shock. People froze at the sight of him, their eyes wide, their faces pale. "Impossible," someone whispered. "They said he was dead," another muttered under their breath. The prince ignored them, pushing forward. He didn't have time for their disbelief. He stopped in the marketplace, his voice sharp. "Where is she?" No one answered. A vendor turned away. A woman clutched her child and stepped back. A man finally spoke, his voice low. "She's gone." Another murmured, "She belongs to the shadows now." The prince's fists clenched. "Where?" An old woman, without looking up, muttered, "Beyond the dark forest." That was all he needed. The prince mounted his horse and rode toward the mist-covered trees. The forest loomed, swallowed in mist. Then, through the darkness, he saw it. Cinderella's castle. Black stone towers stretched into the sky, hidden behind shifting shadows. The gates stood tall, unmoving. The guards appeared. They stood in perfect formation, their armor gleaming under the pale moonlight, gripping their weapons in silence. The prince slowed, gripping his sword. These were not the men who once served the castle. They were hers. "Let me pass!" The guards didn't answer. The wind howled through the trees. Then one raised his hand. A pulse of black energy erupted from his palm, surging toward the prince. The air cracked as the blast hit the ground before him, sending dust and stone flying. The prince staggered back, eyes wide. These were no ordinary men. The guards moved at once. They attacked. The first strike came fast. The prince blocked, countered, slashed, but they did not fall. He couldn't win. With one final strike, he forced his way free, turning and disappearing into the forest. Cinderella's castle was untouchable, but he wasn't done. The following day, the prince gathered a group of his soldiers and rode toward Cinderella's castle. He had failed alone. This time, he would not come unprepared. The gates of the castle stood tall and unmoving, shrouded in thick mist. As they approached, the guards stepped forward, silent, cold, unshaken. The battle was immediate. The guards rushed forward, striking with unnatural speed. The soldiers fought hard, but no matter how many times the guards fell, they rose again. The prince cut through one, only to see him reform instantly. Another guard knocked a soldier back with an unnatural force. The shadows around them thickened. The battle wasn't just physical, it was something else, something darker. The prince gritted his teeth, realizing they couldn't win like this. "Stop!" the prince shouted, raising his hand. "I only want to speak to Queen Cinderella." The battle ceased instantly. The guards froze, stepping back into formation. The silence was deafening. Then, Cinderella emerged. The air grew colder as she stepped onto the grand staircase. Her expression was unreadable, her presence overwhelming. "And who's here to bother my peace?" The queen's voice rang out, sharp and unbothered. The prince stood firm. From the distance, he called out, "Cinderella, it's me. I want to talk to you." The queen stilled. The wind slowed. The shadows at her feet wavered. The prince watched as she took a step forward. Then another. She got closer. She looked at him. For the first time, her expression shifted. A faint crease formed between her brows. Her gaze lingering on his face just a little too long. Uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Her eyes locked onto his, searching, hesitating. Then her voice, low but sharp. "Is this some kind of trick?